Welcome to our continuing series, Questions and Answers for a World in Crisis. Today, Surrender, Part 2, from the Mother. Do you know what it means to be happy? Do you know what it means to be strong? Do you know what it means to be helpful? Well, the surrender, that is, the self-giving to the divine, must be happy, joyful, made gladly. It must be strong. One must not give oneself through weakness and impotence, but with an active and strong will. And then the surrender must not remain absolutely indolent. I have made my surrender. I have nothing more to do in life. I have only to remain still. My surrender is made. And it must be helpful. That is, it must be active. It must undertake the transformation of the being, or do some useful work. Question to Mother. What is the difference between surrender and offering? Mother. The two words are almost synonymous. I make the offering of myself and I surrender myself. But in the gesture of offering, there is something more active than in the gesture of surrender. Unfortunately, soumission in French is not the true word. In English we use surrender. Between the words surrender and offering, there is hardly any difference. But the French word soumission gives the impression of something more passive. You accept, while offering is a giving, a voluntary giving. Consecration generally has a more mystical sense, but this is not absolute. A total consecration signifies a total giving of oneself. Hence, it is the equivalent of the word surrender. Question to Mother. Identification is the goal of yoga. Can one say that surrender is the first step and offering the second? No. Some begin with an offering and end with surrender. It depends upon the character of each one. You may perhaps begin by having a feeling of inferiority. You are a little crushed by the grandeur of the divine, and then you feel a little freer and give with joy what you are. This is not always so. Many begin by self-giving. For them, the easiest movement is to give themselves. In the beginning, the giving is a little indefinite. Then one has to make an effort at times to surrender in detail. You can give yourself with much enthusiasm, but when at every step you have to submit to the higher will, the thing becomes more difficult. Does not offering imply surrender? Mother, not at all. You can give for the joy of giving without any idea of surrender. In a movement of enthusiasm, when you have glimpsed something infinitely higher than yourself, you can give yourself in an élan. But when it is a question of living that every moment, of surrendering oneself every minute to the higher will, and when every minute requires this surrender, it is more difficult. But if by offering you mean the integral offering of all your movements, all your activities, that is equivalent to surrender, without implying it necessarily. But then it is no longer a movement made in enthusiasm. It is something which has to be realized in detail. By surrender, we mean not this, i.e., sacrifice, but a spontaneous self-giving, a giving of all yourself to the divine, to a greater consciousness of which you are a part. Surrender will not diminish, but increase. It will not lessen or weaken or destroy your personality. It will fortify and aggrandize it. Surrender means a free, total giving with all the delight of the giving. There is no sense of sacrifice in it. If you have the slightest feeling that you are making a sacrifice, then it is no longer surrender. For it means that you reserve yourself, or that you are trying to give with grudging or with pain and effort, and have not the joy of the gift. Perhaps not even the feeling that you are giving. When you do anything with the sense of a compression of your being, be sure that you are doing it in the wrong way. True surrender enlarges you. It increases your capacity. It gives you a greater measure in quality and quantity, which you could not have had by yourself. This new greater measure of quality and quantity is different from anything you could attain before. You enter into another world, into a wideness which you could not have entered if you did not surrender. It is as when a drop of water falls into the sea. If it still kept there its separate identity, it would remain a little drop of water and nothing more. A little drop crushed by all the immensity around, because it has not surrendered. But surrendering, it unites with the sea and participates in the nature and power and vastness of the whole sea. There are many wrong ideas current about surrender. Most people seem to look upon surrender as an abdication of the personality, but that is a grievous error. For the individual is meant to manifest one aspect of the divine consciousness, and the expression of its characteristic nature is what creates his personality. Then, by taking the right attitude towards the divine, this personality is purified of all the influences of the lower nature, which diminish and distort it, and it becomes more strongly personal, more itself, more complete. May 1933, Mother writes, "Joy comes from surrender to the divine command." Question to Mother: somebody told me that it is not necessary to surrender or be sincere. We only have to open. Is it true? Certainly not. Who told you such nonsense? Without sincerity, the path of yoga is dangerous. Without surrender, it is impossible. It is not enough to surrender. The ego must be dissolved, must merge with the divine, disappear in him. If one's surrender is truly sincere, then there is this constant attitude in the being, this total self-giving to the divine, "Thy will be done." In this way one can, without knowing, without understanding, instinctively, choose the thing that should be done and reject the one that should not. But this becomes an instinct, a sort of automatic thing, if your surrender is perfect. And that is the very advantage of surrender, for you can do the right thing in the right way automatically before having the knowledge. In English, the word is surrender. There is no French word which gives exactly that sense. But Sri Aurobindo has said, I think we have read this, that surrender is the first and absolute condition for doing the yoga. So, if we follow what he has said, this is not just one of the necessary qualities. It is the first attitude, indispensable for beginning the yoga. If one has not decided to make a total surrender, one cannot begin. Namaste.